We fear a hard economic blow, said James Barnes from the Horticultural Trades Association to the German press agency. The industry is facing the largest non-tariff trade barriers in its entire history, said Barnes about the rules and restrictions in place since the end of the Brexit transition period. By the way, you should stay tuned until the end if you don't want to miss anything interesting. And if you don't want to miss anything at all, just subscribe to my channel and click the little bell. That goes for the actual subscribers as well. Sometimes the bell has been turned off, so have a look. Since the end of the Brexit transition phase, special health checks and certificates have been required for the import and export of products. It takes too long, costs too much, and is completely inefficient, says Barnes. In addition, there are even bans or regulations for many plants, such as seed potatoes or trees, that make export almost impossible. The plant breeder blames the Brexit trade pact negotiated at the last minute, but also the EU's insufficient willingness to find constructive solutions for individual trade hurdles. So another one who didn't understand the third country thing. According to the Horticultural Trades Association, the exports of British plant breeders have a volume of around £80 million. That's a good 93 million euros per year. Most of that would go to Europe. This business is now acutely at risk because of Brexit, said Barnes. Yeah, but Brexit is not our fault. The additional import costs would also weaken the industry's profitability. At the same time, the end of the free movement of workers, for example from Eastern Europe, is creating problems for the industry. Many farms have been employing seasonal workers from other EU countries to harvest their plants for decades. This too has become more complicated after Brexit. And another thing, tough Brexit negotiations, global trade conflicts, and a pandemic that at times paralyzed entire supply chains. The export-oriented economy in Ostallgäu and Kaufbeuren here in Germany proved to be robust despite major challenges last year. This is evidenced by the number of foreign trade documents that the industry trade board Swabia issued for 2020. Many companies from the region are broadly based and have stable business relationship all over the world, says Peter Leo Dobler, chairman of the IHK, that's the Trade Board Regional Assembly in Kaufbeuren, Ostallgäu. That makes them resilient to crises of all kinds. This is exactly what our companies now benefit from. The IHK Swabia issued more than 50,300 export documents in 2020. These are primarily certificates of origin or certified commercial invoices, documents that are mandatory in many countries when goods are delivered abroad. The number is therefore an important indicator of the extent of foreign trade activities in the domestic economy. It fell slightly in the past year, but despite all the reports of the crisis, it reached 85% of the previous year's level across Swabia. More than 1,900 export documents were applied for in the regional office in Kaufbeuren alone. This shows that the companies did feel the general economic downturn. However, they were largely able to avert the massive slump in exports that had been feared, says Gerhard Schlichterle, Vice President of the IHK Swabia. The export figures for 2020 fell by more than 11% across Bavaria, as the current analysis by the State Office for Statistics shows. Recently, however, a clear upward trend was noticeable again, which is also emerging for Bavarian Swabia. Foreign trade is very important to the Bavarian Swabian economy. Around 3,000 companies are active in foreign markets. Domestic industry earns more than every second euro abroad. Above all, mechanical engineering, the automotive, logistics and infrastructure sectors, but also the food and packaging industry are strongly influenced by international business in the Ostallgäu. China, the USA and the European single market are the most important trading regions. They are all affected by the corona crisis. The companies from Bavaria and Swabia are particularly troubled by the unusual trade fairs and travel restrictions. In the annual nationwide IHK survey Going International, one-third of the participating companies from Bavaria and Swabia named this as the greatest obstacle. As a result, companies lack the opportunity to initiate new projects and acquire orders in direct exchange with their partners, says Dobler. The lower demand and postponed investments due to the corona crisis are also having a negative impact on business. Every fifth company from Bavaria and Swabia stated in the survey that they suffered from supply chain difficulties. The companies reacted to this by increasing their stocks or by winning additional suppliers. The relocation of production to their own company, on the other hand, hardly plays a role. 42% of the Bavarian Swabian companies surveyed reported an increase in obstacles in international business outside of the corona crisis. Brexit plays a major role in this. A third of companies expect their own business situation to deteriorate further because the United Kingdom left the EU. Despite the agreement reached with the UK, the customs clearance and logistics problems are the main concerns. It is important that the last uncertainties left by the free trade agreement are now removed, said Vice President Schlichterle. The companies want to continue their business with the UK. According to the survey, two-thirds are not planning to relocate their investment activities away from the island. In general, companies see the increased certification and safety requirements in the international movement of goods and, of course, services as the greatest obstacle to their business. Such trade barriers lead to higher costs and longer delivery times in international business. The excessive bureaucracy is an additional burden on the economy in this difficult situation, says Björn Artmer, regional manager of the IHK in Allgäu. Nevertheless, export-oriented companies are looking more optimistically into the future again, as the economic survey by the Chamber of Commerce Swabia shows. Demand, especially from China, is currently picking up strongly. 40% of the companies expect sales growth in their business with the Far East. In contrast, the European markets continue to weaken. According to the companies surveyed, this will not change much in the coming months. The majority of companies expect a slight upward trend for business in the USA as well. And something else, Michael Gove, once again, has been accused of willfully ignoring the facts in an effort to avoid accountability for the long-term damage caused by Brexit. The Scottish National Party, the SNP, said that the Cabinet Office Minister and his Tory colleagues were sticking their heads in the sand rather than face up to the realities of Brexit's impact on the UK economy. The news comes after a newly released report found that Brexit and COVID had combined to cause the UK to lose market shares in key global economies. The report from Aston University's Lloyds Banking Group Centre for Business Prosperity said that in some key export destinations, Germany, the US and China, the UK seems to have suffered a sharper decline, experienced a slower recovery, and seen its global competitiveness dwindle. The UK's decline in exports to the US appeared the sharpest in both absolute and relative terms, and the most prolonged among the major European countries, compared to the major European countries except for France. The research, based on United Nations trade statistics, adds, the combination of COVID, Brexit and the UK's long-term productivity challenges will put British businesses in an adverse position for the foreseeable future. On Saturday, March 6th, the UK Statistics Authority officially reprimanded Gove's Cabinet Office for the use of unpublished and unverified data in an attempt to disprove allegations that Brexit had caused a massive fall in exports through British ports. I reported on that one. The Road Haulage Association said a survey of its international members showed UK export volumes had dropped by 68% in January. In rebuttal, the Cabinet Office cited unpublished figures, saying the number of vehicles passing through British ports was close to normal at 95% outbound and 96% inbound, in spite of the impact of COVID lockdowns on trade. The UK Statistics Authority said the Cabinet Office had made claims based on unpublished data, and as such, these figures cannot be verified. It is our expectation that any data used publicly by government should be published in an accessible form with appropriate explanations of context and sources. The RGA said that they had been talking about goods, not vehicles, as many trucks were returning to the continent empty because of issues imposed on UK businesses by Brexit. Now the SNP have accused Gove and the London Tories of conveniently ignoring the facts. But that is not a new thing. The party's shadow cabinet minister, Stuart Hosey, said as the Brexit blows to Scotland and the UK's economy keep on coming and businesses and communities suffer, the Tories are doing what they do best and sticking their heads in the sand. And this is only the beginning, with more changes, barriers, and economic and social problems still to come. Boris Johnson's extreme Brexit imposed on us against our will has already cost Scotland almost £4 billion and is projected to cost every person the equivalent of £1,600 in added costs, red tape, and barriers to trade. But Michael Gove is conveniently ignoring these facts in an effort to evade transparency and accountability, as the Tories so often do. In May, Scotland faces a choice of two futures: the long-term damage of Brexit and Tory austerity cuts at Westminster, or the opportunity to protect our place in Europe and build a strong, fair and green recovery as an independent country. With both votes SNP in May, we can put Scotland's future in Scotland's hands, not Boris Johnson's hands. The Office for Budget Responsibility has said Brexit will result in the long-run loss of productivity of around 4% compared with remaining in the EU, and that we now expect the temporary near-term disruption to EU-UK goods trade to reduce GDP by 0.5% in the first quarter of this year. A UK government spokesperson said, "We will always stand by Scottish businesses, whether that's helping them deal with COVID-19 through support packages worth £280 billion, getting the US to lift tariffs on Scotch whisky, or ensuring they benefit from a new free trade agreements we are striking around the world." We know that some businesses are facing challenges with specific aspects of our new trading relationship with the EU. And that's why, in addition to the £20 million SME Brexit Support Fund, we are operating export helplines, running webinars with experts, and offering businesses support via our network of 300 international trade advisors. The latest available data shows that overall freight volumes between the UK and the EU are back to their normal levels. No, they're not. Another topic, the UK government's opening strategy is raising hopes that the music festivals can resume in the summer of 2021. But the organizers are still faced with problems and are calling for guests to be vaccinated, among other things. The opening strategy recently presented by the British government is a positive sign for organizers. From May 17th, outdoor events with up to 4,000 guests should be allowed again. From June 21st, contact limits could be lifted completely, depending on how the pandemic develops. The events previously announced in the UK were, unsurprisingly, sold out in record time. But the responsible organizers are worried about the summer. Josh Robinson, organizer of the Drum and Bass Festival Hospitality Weekend in the Woods, for example, calls on the government to follow a concept in the opening strategy that is already being planned for many other areas. Visitors should have to show a vaccination certificate with which it is proven that they have been vaccinated against COVID-19. This should take place in the form of a uniform specification from the government in order to relieve the organizers and to create clear clarity. Robinson also received approval from Gareth Williams, organizer of the Cropredy Folk Festival. The planned openings by the British government and the resulting immensely increased demand are, on the other hand, a clearly positive sign for the organizers. At the same time, however, they also create uncertainty. The organizers felt like a kind of bank, since it cannot be said with certainty whether events can take place as planned or whether tickets still have to be refunded, says Robinson. The reason for these uncertainties is, on the one hand, the development of the pandemic that cannot really be planned, and on the other hand, the fact that the safety regulations have not yet been established. Many of the planned festivals are still not definitely scheduled. The individual behavior of musicians also adds complexity to festival planning. A compulsory proof of vaccination for visitors would ultimately entail a requirement for musicians and their crews to provide proof, and many artists in particular are more critical of a compulsory vaccination certificate. A guideline of the government which requires the presentation of a vaccination certificate or negative tests could at least represent an urgently needed simplification for festival organizers. Because, they say, if we cannot move on soon, the entire support strategy for this industry will be ruined, said Robinson. Many of the around 70 festival organizers in the UK also fear having to carry out huge amounts of quick tests for their visitors if their events are to take place. However, the workload is simply not logistically feasible. The enormous planning uncertainty means an enormous additional financial burden, while many organizers are still waiting for financial support from the state. Many festivals have therefore been postponed to late summer in order to gain more time, but this does not have any advantages. The demand for employees for this period is increasing enormously. But many self-employed bar employees or lighting and sound technicians, on whose employees organizers normally rely, had to file for bankruptcy due to the pandemic. Festival organizers are masters at anticipating all sorts of eventualities. But this year there are so many unpredictable factors to consider when planning, said Williams. And another thing is, in the UK, according to the epidemiologist and government advisor Chris Whitty, the number of infections will increase again despite the vaccination. Even deaths from COVID-19 could not be avoided despite the vaccination campaign, the chief medical officer told MPs. He calls for caution when reopening after the lockdown, as this will affect when and how much the virus will spread again. All model calculations indicate that there will be a further increase. This will affect the people who have either not been vaccinated or have had no effect on the vaccine. Some of them would have to be hospitalized, and some of them would die. The ratio of infections to deaths will drop as a result of the vaccination, but unfortunately not to zero. And if you want to stay informed, please subscribe to my channel. Auf Wiedersehen.